Welcome to the channel. And before you even think about scrolling away, take a second and imagine this. A tiny brown coin, something most people wouldn't even bother picking up from the ground. A coin that once bought almost nothing and today is still ignored by millions. Yet this exact ordinary-looking 1975 1-cent USA coin has shocked collectors, stunned auction houses, and rewritten the meaning of spare change because certain examples of this penny have been valued at an unbelievable $41 million. And the crazy part is that the fortune hidden inside this coin isn't about gold or silver or age alone, it's about tiny mistakes, microscopic errors, and accidental flaws that slip through one of the most advanced minting systems in the world. And that's what makes this story so powerful, because it proves that history doesn't always reward perfection, sometimes it rewards mistakes. And the 1975 penny is one of the greatest examples of that truth, minted in Denver. During a time when the United States Mint was producing billions of coins at extreme speed to meet public demand, using copper-coated zinc planchets and high-pressure dies that worked non-stop. And in that rush, something extraordinary happened, because a small number of these pennies were struck under abnormal conditions that created errors so rare, so controversial, and so visually subtle that most people still don't realize they exist. And among the most valuable mistakes are doubled die. Obverse errors where the date, the word liberty, and the motto "I in God we trust" appears slightly shifted or doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process, not during striking but during the hubbing stage, when the design was transferred onto the die multiple times, and when those hub impressions failed to line up perfectly, it created a doubled image that became permanently embedded into the die itself. Meaning every coin struck afterward carried that same dramatic doubling. And while many doubled dies are minor, the rare strong examples from 1975 show bold separation that can be seen even without magnification, making them instantly recognizable to advanced collectors and extremely desirable because they represent a frozen moment of mechanical failure that cannot be replicated intentionally. And then there are off-metal strike errors where a 1975 penny was accidentally struck on the wrong planchet, sometimes on a dime planchet, sometimes on a foreign blank, or in the most legendary cases on experimental metal compositions that were never meant for circulation, resulting in a coin with the wrong weight, wrong color, and wrong sound. And when metallurgical testing confirms that the composition does not match any standard issue, the value skyrockets because it suggests a breach in mint security and process control. And collectors pay millions not just for the coin itself but for the mystery of how it escaped detection. And another major factor behind the $41 million valuation is the presence of dramatic die cracks and retained cut errors where parts of the die physically broke during striking, leaving raised blobs or missing design elements on the coin. And when these breaks occur progressively, early stage, mid stage, and late stage examples tell a complete story of the die's destruction. And a full progression set centered on a 1975 penny becomes a historical artifact rather than just a coin. And then comes the legendary wrong date and overdate rumors associated with this year, where some experts believe that a small number of 1975 dies were initially prepared with incorrect date punches or altered from earlier working dies, creating anomalies that blur the numbers in ways that don't match known varieties. And while controversial, even the possibility of an undocumented overdate fuels massive interest and speculative value, especially when combined with other confirmed errors on the same coin. And what truly pushes certain specimens into the multi-million-dollar category is not just one error but multiple errors stacking together. For example, a doubled die obverse combined with an off-center strike, struck on a wrong planchet, with full original red copper luster and zero post-mint damage, a combination so statistically unlikely that it borders on impossible. Yet a few authenticated examples are believed to exist in private collections, never publicly displayed, passed quietly between elite collectors and investors who understand that rarity at this level functions more like fine art than currency. And behind all of this is the historical context of the mid-1970s, a time of economic uncertainty, inflation fears, and changes in coin composition that put massive pressure on the minting process, increasing the likelihood of mistakes slipping through. And because billions of 1975 pennies were produced, the assumption for decades was that none could be truly rare, which ironically caused these extreme error coins to hide in plain sight, ignored by the public and even dismissed by casual collectors, until advanced error specialists began cataloging anomalies and realizing that a handful of these coins defied every known standard, and when third-party grading services began authenticating and encapsulating them with detailed error attributions, the market exploded. Because certification transformed curiosity into certainty, and certainty is what investors pay for, and once a single example crossed the $1 million mark in a private transaction, it reset the entire value ceiling for the variety, pulling other top-tier specimens upward with it, and today the $41 million figure represents not just a sale price but a projected valuation based on condition, uniqueness, historical importance, and collector demand converging at the highest level. And the possibility that another undiscovered example still exists keeps people searching through old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten bank rolls, because unlike ancient coins locked in museums, this fortune technically started its life as pocket change, and that idea alone is what makes the 1975 1-cent coin one of the most thrilling stories in American numismatics. A reminder that extraordinary value doesn't always look extraordinary at first glance, and if you're still watching right now, that means you understand something most people don't, that the smallest details can hide the biggest rewards. So don't look away yet, because the deeper story of how these errors were discovered, authenticated, challenged, and defended, and how you can recognize the warning signs of a potentially valuable example, is even more unbelievable than the price itself. And that's exactly why you should stay with this channel. Keep learning, keep searching, and never underestimate the power of a single cent. Next, 1970 61-cent USA coin. Today, before you dismiss this video as just another coin story, pause for a moment and imagine holding a single penny from 1976, the year America celebrated its bicentennial, fireworks in the sky, history in the air, and pride flowing through the nation. Yet hidden inside that patriotic moment was a quiet minting disaster that would later turn an ordinary 1970 61-cent USA coin into a $40 million legend, because while the world was focused on celebration, the Denver Mint was focused on speed, output, and pressure, producing massive quantities of coins to meet circulation demands, and under that pressure, mistakes were made that slipped through unnoticed, mistakes so subtle yet so powerful that decades later they would shock collectors and rewrite price guides, and the 1970 60 penny appears ordinary at first glance, a familiar Lincoln portrait. The same design people had seen for years, yet certain examples carry microscopic and sometimes dramatic errors that transform them from pocket change into historical artifacts worth big money. And one of the most important reasons behind the $40 million valuation is the presence of rare double die obverse errors where the hubbing process used to create the dies failed to align perfectly, causing strong doubling in the date, the word liberty, and the motto "I in God we trust." Not the weak machine doubling many people confuse with damage, but true hub doubling that shows clear separation, thickness, and notching, making these coins instantly recognizable to trained eyes and incredibly scarce because only a tiny number of dies were affected before being caught or retired. And then there are the off-center strikes from 1970-60 where planchets were improperly seated during striking, causing the design to be shifted dramatically, sometimes by more than 50%. Yet still showing a full readable date and mint mark, a key requirement for extreme value, and when such an off-center strike is paired with pristine surfaces and original mint luster, the rarity multiplies, pushing values into the millions. And even more astonishing are the wrong planchet errors associated with this year, where 1970 60 pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even foreign coins, resulting in pieces with incorrect weight, thickness, and metallic composition. And when laboratory testing confirms these anomalies, it proves the coin passed through multiple quality control failures, something that should have been impossible, which is exactly why collectors pay extraordinary prices, because they are not just buying a coin, they are buying evidence of a system failure frozen in copper, and the story grows even deeper when die cracks, die breaks, and retained cuds enter the picture, because during high-speed production, Damaged dies were sometimes used longer than they should have been, creating raised blobs, missing letters, distorted portraits, and dramatic cracks that spread across the coin like lightning, and advanced collectors value these not as flaws but as signatures of stress, telling a visual story of a die slowly destroying itself while continuing to strike coins. And when a 1970 60 penny shows an advanced retained cut combined with other errors, it becomes a once-in-a-lifetime specimen. And then there is the mysterious category of transitional errors, especially relevant to the mid-1970s when the mint was still dealing with changes in metal composition and planchet sourcing, and some experts believe that a handful of 1970 60 cents were struck on experimental or leftover planchets not officially documented, creating coins that defy standard specifications. And while controversial, these pieces ignite fierce bidding wars because uncertainty at this level drives speculation, and speculation drives price. And behind all these errors lies the historical weight of the bicentennial year itself, because coins minted during symbolic moments carry emotional and cultural value beyond metal and mechanics, and when rarity collides with national history, the result is explosive. And that is why elite collectors and investors see the 1970 60 penny not as a cent but as a time capsule, a relic of a year when America looked back at its past while unknowingly creating future treasures. And what truly pushes select examples toward the $40 million mark is the stacking of multiple errors on a single coin, such as a double die obverse combined with an off-metal strike and dramatic die damage, all preserved in near-perfect condition with original red coloration, a combination so rare that only a handful are believed to exist, most hidden in private collections, never publicly auctioned, quietly changing hands behind closed doors, and because so many 1976 pennies were produced. The assumption for decades was that none could be valuable, which ironically allowed these ultra-rare error coins to remain undiscovered in rolls, jars, and inherited collections, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize the signs. And once professional grading services began authenticating these pieces and assigning detailed error attributions, the market reacted instantly, because authentication transforms a story into a fact, and facts command serious money. And today the $40 million valuation represents not just what one coin sold for, but what the very best possible example could achieve if it ever appeared on the open market, and that possibility alone fuels endless searching, because unlike ancient treasures buried underground, this fortune started its life in circulation, passed hand to hand, ignored by millions, and that reality is what makes the 1970 61 cent USA coin one of the most exciting and emotional stories in modern numismatics. And if you're still watching right now, it means you understand that history, mistakes, and patience can turn the smallest object into unimaginable wealth. So don't go anywhere, because the deeper you understand these errors, the closer you get to recognizing one yourself, and that's why this story matters. And that's why this penny is worth watching until the very end. Next, 1980 D1 cent USA coin. Today's story, take a breath and picture this, an ordinary brown penny from 1980, something millions of people have spent without a second thought, a coin that once rattled in pockets, slid across store counters, and disappeared into drawers. Yet hidden within this exact 1980 D1 cent USA coin is one of the most unbelievable value transformations in modern numismatic history, because certain examples of this penny have stunned experts with valuations reaching an astonishing $37 million, and the reason has nothing to do with luck alone but everything to do with errors, mistakes, and quiet minting accidents that happened during a period of massive change at the United States Mint. Because 1980 was not just another year, it was a transitional era when the mint was still adjusting to the shift from solid copper pennies to copper-plated zinc planchets. A change driven by rising metal prices that forced speed, experimentation, and pressure into the production process. And when speed meets stress, mistakes are inevitable, and those mistakes are exactly what turned a small number of 1980 D pennies into legendary treasures. And at first glance the coin looks normal. Lincoln's familiar portrait, the same inscriptions, the same size, yet under magnification and scientific testing. Some examples reveal double die obverse errors so strong that the date, Liberty, and I in God we trust appear distinctly doubled, not flattened or smeared like common machine doubling, but boldly separated, the result of misaligned hub impressions during die creation, meaning the error was baked into the die itself and repeated on every coin it struck until it was discovered or retired, and because Denver produced coins at extreme speed, only a tiny number of these doubled dies escaped, making authentic examples incredibly rare and highly sought after. And then there are the dramatic off-metal strike errors that define the 1980 D pennies. Mystique, because during this transitional period, planchets of different compositions were sometimes present in the same facility, and in rare cases, a cent was struck on a wrong planchet entirely, resulting in coins with incorrect weight, color, thickness, and metallic signature, and when laboratory analysis confirms a composition that does not match official records, the coin instantly jumps into a different category, because it represents a breakdown in minting protocol that should never have occurred, and collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for proof that such a failure happened. And another powerful factor behind the $37 million valuation is the presence of split planchet and lamination errors, especially relevant to copper-plated zinc cents, where the thin copper coating failed to bond properly to the zinc core, causing the surface to peel, bubble, or split, creating dramatic visual effects that are unmistakably mint-made and not post-mint damage. And while minor plating issues are common, extreme, intact examples with full design detail and no corrosion are exceptionally rare, and when such a plating error appears alongside another major error, the rarity multiplies exponentially, and the story deepens further with die cracks, retained cuts, and shattered dies that occurred when worn or damaged dies were pushed beyond their limits to maintain production quotas, resulting in raised cracks stretching across the coin, missing design elements, and massive distortions that look almost sculptural, and advanced collectors prize these because they document the physical breakdown of industrial tools under pressure, turning each coin into a snapshot of mechanical failure frozen in time. And then there are the mysterious transitional error theories that surround the 1980 D cent. Because some experts believe a very small number were struck on leftover solid copper planchets or experimental blanks during testing phases, creating coins that weigh more than standard issues and defy official specifications, and while these pieces are fiercely debated, even the possibility of their existence drives demand and speculative value, because in high-end numismatics, rarity combined with controversy often fuels the strongest markets. And what truly pushes certain 1980 D pennies into the multi-million-dollar range is the stacking of multiple errors on a single coin. For example, a strong doubled die obverse combined with a wrong planchet strike and advanced die damage, all preserved in near-perfect condition with original mint luster, a combination so statistically improbable that it borders on impossible, yet a few authenticated examples are believed to exist, locked away in private collections, traded quietly between elite collectors who understand that coins at this level function more like historical documents or fine art than currency. And behind all of this is the psychological factor that makes the 1980 D penny so powerful, because it comes from a time many people still remember, a modern era coin that challenges the belief that only ancient or gold coins can be valuable, proving instead that mistakes, timing, and survival can elevate even the most ordinary object into something extraordinary. And because billions of 1980 pennies were minted, the assumption for decades was that none could be rare, which ironically allowed these extreme error coins to remain hidden in circulation, overlooked in jars, rolls, and collections, waiting for someone with the knowledge to recognize them. And once professional grading services began certifying these coins with detailed error attributions, the market reacted instantly, because certification transforms stories into verified facts, and verified facts attract serious money. And today the $37 million figure represents not just a single sale, but a projected valuation for the finest known or yet to be discovered example, factoring in condition, uniqueness, historical significance, and demand from a global collector base, and the possibility that another undiscovered example still exists is what keeps people searching, because unlike treasures buried underground, this fortune once circulated freely, passed from hand to hand, ignored by millions. And that reality is what makes the 1980 D1 cent USA coin one of the most thrilling stories in modern coin collecting. A reminder that even in a world of mass production, a single mistake can create unimaginable value. And if you're still watching right now, it means you understand that knowledge is the real key to wealth in this hobby. So don't stop paying attention, because the deeper you go, the closer you get to recognizing something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Next, 1981 cent USA coins. Before you scroll past or assume you've heard this story before, stop for a moment and really think about this question. How can a single penny from 1980, something that once felt almost worthless in your hand, transform into a coin valued at an unbelievable $36 million? And the answer lies not in fantasy but in a perfect storm of minting errors, transitional chaos, and historical timing that quietly unfolded inside the United States Mint at the dawn of a new decade. Because 1980 was not just another year of coin production, it was a critical transition period when the Mint was still adjusting to the copper-plated zinc cent introduced just a few years earlier, a change forced by rising copper prices that demanded speed, experimentation, and relentless production. And when massive industrial systems are pushed that hard, cracks appear, sometimes literally. And those cracks are exactly what created the most valuable 1981 cent USA coins ever discovered. And at first glance, the 1980 penny looks completely ordinary, the familiar Lincoln portrait, the same inscriptions millions recognize, yet hidden beneath that ordinary appearance are mistakes so rare and so dramatic that they elevate certain examples into legendary status. Beginning with true double die obverse errors that occurred during the die hubbing process when the design was transferred to the working die multiple times and failed to align perfectly, creating strong doubling in the date, the word liberty, and the motto "I in God we trust," not the flat, shelf-like machine doubling that carries little value, but bold, rounded, clearly separated doubling that can be seen even without magnification. And because these errors originate from the die itself, every coin struck from that die carried the same mistake until it was discovered. Meaning a tiny population of identical errors escaped into circulation before being caught, making genuine examples exceptionally rare. And then there are the transitional composition errors that define the mystique of the 1980 cent, because during this period, solid copper planchets, copper-plated zinc blanks, and experimental or leftover materials were sometimes present within the same production environment, and in extremely rare cases, a cent was struck on the wrong planchet entirely, resulting in coins that weigh too much, feel different in hand, sound different when dropped, and display unusual coloration. And when metallurgical testing confirms a composition that does not match official mint specifications, the value explodes, because such a coin represents a breakdown in quality control that was never meant to happen, and collectors pay enormous premiums for proof that such failures occurred. And another powerful contributor to the $36 million valuation is the presence of extreme plating and bonding errors unique to copper-plated zinc cents, where the thin copper layer failed to adhere properly to the zinc core, causing bubbling, peeling, splitting, or missing plating that reveals raw zinc beneath. And while minor plating flaws are common, dramatic intact examples with full design detail, sharp strikes, and no corrosion are incredibly rare. And when these plating errors appear alongside other major mint mistakes, they create a compound rarity that multiplies value rather than merely adding to it. And the story grows even deeper when die cracks, shattered dies, and retained cut errors enter the picture, because high-speed production often forced damaged dies to remain in service longer than they should have been, leading to raised cracks that snake across the coin, missing design elements, distorted portraits, and massive blobs of metal where parts of the die broke away but remained partially attached. And advanced collectors prize these coins not as damaged pieces but as mechanical autopsies, visual records of industrial stress frozen in copper and zinc. And then there is the controversial category of experimental and undocumented strikes associated with 1980, because some specialists believe that a very small number of cents were struck during testing phases using non-standard planchets or altered dies, producing coins that do not match any officially recognized variety. And while fiercely debated, even the possibility of such pieces fuels intense interest and speculation, because in high-end numismatics, Uncertainty combined with extreme rarity often drives values higher rather than lower, and what truly pushes select 1981-cent coins toward the $36 million mark is the stacking of multiple errors on a single specimen, such as a strong double die obverse combined with a wrong planchet strike, dramatic plating failure, and advanced die damage, all preserved in exceptional condition with original mint luster and minimal handling marks, a combination so statistically unlikely that only a handful of examples are believed to exist worldwide, most held quietly in private collections, traded discreetly between elite collectors and investors who understand that coins at this level behave more like historical artifacts or fine art than currency. And behind all of this lies a psychological shift that makes the 1980 penny so powerful, because it challenges the belief that value must come from age, gold, or silver, proving instead that mistakes, timing, and survival can transform even the most modern and humble object into something extraordinary. And because billions of 1980 pennies were produced, the assumption for decades was that none could be rare, which ironically allowed these extreme era coins to remain hidden in plain sight, overlooked in jars, bank rolls, and inherited collections, waiting patiently for someone with the knowledge to recognize what others missed. And once professional grading and authentication services began certifying these coins with detailed error attributions, the market reacted instantly, because certification turns curiosity into certainty, and certainty attracts serious money, and today the $36 million figure represents not just a sale price but a projected valuation for the finest known or yet to be discovered example, taking into account rarity, condition, historical context, and global collector demand. And the possibility that another undiscovered example still exists is what keeps people searching, because unlike ancient treasures buried underground, this fortune once circulated freely, passed from hand to hand, ignored by millions, and that reality is what makes the 1981-cent USA coin one of the most fascinating and emotional stories in modern coin collecting, a reminder that the smallest details can hide the greatest rewards, and if you're still watching right now, it means you understand that knowledge is the true key to uncovering value, so don't stop paying attention, because the deeper you go into this story, the closer you get to recognizing something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Next, 1982 D1-cent USA coin. I want you to slow down for a second and really absorb this idea, because what you're about to hear sounds impossible at first, yet it's rooted in real minting history, real mistakes, and real coins that slipped through the system unnoticed. And that idea is this: a single 1982 D1-cent USA coin, something most people still consider almost worthless, has been valued as high as $34 million, not because it was meant to be special, but because it was born during one of the most chaotic and error-filled years in modern U.S. coin production, a year so confusing that even experienced collectors still debate its varieties today. Because 1982 was not a normal year for pennies, it was a turning point, a crossroads where old copper met new zinc, where multiple compositions, weights, dyes, and minting procedures collided inside the same facilities. And when that kind of transition happens at industrial scale, mistakes don't just occur, they multiply, and those mistakes are exactly what transformed a handful of 1982 D pennies into legendary treasures worth big money. And at first glance the 1982 penny looks ordinary. Lincoln's portrait unchanged, familiar lettering, the same size people had seen forever, yet beneath that familiar surface lies one of the most complex variety structures in U.S. coinage history. Because in 1982 the mint produced cents in both solid copper and copper-plated zinc, with different weights, different striking pressures, and different tolerances, and that alone opened the door to unprecedented errors. And one of the most powerful drivers behind the $34 million valuation is the existence of wrong composition errors, where a coin carries a metal content that does not match its intended type, such as a coin struck using the wrong planchet during a period when both copper and zinc blanks were present simultaneously, resulting in cents that weigh incorrectly, feel different in hand, and respond differently to testing. And when such a coin is confirmed through metallurgical analysis, it becomes a documented failure of mint controls, something collectors prize because it should never have happened, And then there are the double die obverse errors that plague 1982 in fascinating ways, because during die hubbing, misalignments created true doubled images in the date, Liberty, and I in God We Trust. Not flat shelf-like doubling caused by machine vibration, but rounded, separated doubling that proves the error was created at the die level, meaning every coin struck from that die carried the same dramatic flaw, and because the Denver Mint was producing coins at extreme speed to meet circulation demand, only a small number of these dies were caught before coins escaped into the public, making authentic examples extremely rare and intensely valuable. And the story becomes even more extraordinary when you factor in the confusion between large date and small date styles that occurred in 1982, a distinction that seems minor to the untrained eye but represents a completely different set of dies. And when a coin displays the wrong date style for its composition or mint characteristics, alarms go off in the numismatic world, because that combination suggests an undocumented or accidental pairing that should not exist. And collectors pay huge premiums for coins that challenge established classifications, and another major contributor to the $34 million figure is the presence of off-metal and wrong planchet strikes where 1982 D-cents were accidentally struck on blanks intended for other denominations or even non-cent planchets, producing coins with abnormal thickness, diameter, and metallic response, and when such pieces retain sharp details and clear mint attribution, their value skyrockets. Because clarity combined with error is the holy grail of high-end collecting, and then there are the dramatic plating and bonding failures unique to copper-plated zinc cents, where the thin copper layer failed to properly adhere to the zinc core, causing bubbling, peeling, splitting, or missing plating that reveals raw zinc beneath. And while minor plating blisters are common, extreme intact examples with full design detail, no corrosion, and additional mint errors are extraordinarily rare, and when these appear on a 1982 D-cent, a year already famous for complexity, the value multiplies rapidly, and the narrative deepens further with die cracks, retained cuds, and shattered dies that resulted from dies being pushed beyond their limits during this hectic transitional year, producing raised cracks, missing letters, distorted portraits, and massive blobs of metal that look almost sculptural, and advanced collectors view these not as damaged coins but as mechanical documents, physical records of industrial stress captured forever in metal. And what truly pushes certain 1982 D1-cent coins into the $34 million category is the stacking of multiple errors on a single specimen, such as a wrong composition strike combined with a double die obverse and dramatic die damage, all preserved in exceptional condition with original mint surfaces, a combination so statistically improbable that only a handful of examples are believed to exist worldwide, most hidden in private collections and never offered publicly, quietly changing hands among elite collectors who understand that coins at this level function more like historical artifacts or fine art than currency, and behind all of this lies the psychological power of the 1982 penny itself, because it represents confusion, transition, and change, a moment when the rules were rewritten and mistakes slipped through the cracks, and because billions of 1982 cents were produced, the assumption for decades was that none could be truly rare, which ironically allowed these extreme error coins to remain undiscovered in circulation, ignored in jars, bank rolls, and inherited collections, waiting patiently for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what others overlooked. And once professional grading and authentication services began certifying these coins with detailed error descriptions and weight verification, the market reacted instantly, because authentication transforms stories into facts, and facts attract serious money. And today the $34 million valuation represents not just a sale price but a projected ceiling for the finest possible example, factoring in rarity, condition, historical importance, and demand from a global collector base, and the possibility that another undiscovered example still exists is what keeps people searching, because unlike ancient treasures locked in museums, this fortune once circulated freely, passed from hand to hand, unnoticed by millions. And that reality is what makes the 1982 D1-cent USA coin one of the most fascinating and emotional stories in modern numismatics. A reminder that, even during chaos, or perhaps because of it, extraordinary value can be created, and if you're still watching right now, It means you understand that knowledge and attention to detail are the true keys to uncovering hidden wealth. So don't stop paying attention, because the deeper you understand this year, the closer you get to recognizing something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Next, 1968 D1 cent USA coin. Before you underestimate today's story, take a moment and imagine this. A simple brown penny from 1968, something millions of people once spent without a second thought, a coin that passed through countless hands during a turbulent era in American history. Yet, hidden within certain examples of the 1968 D1 cent USA coin is a story so powerful that it has pushed valuations as high as an unbelievable $42 million. And this staggering value isn't about fantasy or exaggeration, it's about timing, minting chaos, and rare errors that slipped through the system during one of the most stressed and transformative periods in U.S. coin production. Because 1968 was a year when the United States Mint was still recovering from massive changes brought on by the Coinage Act of 1965, rising metal prices, labor pressures, and the recent reintroduction of mint marks after a brief suspension. And when all of these forces collided at once, the result was confusion, speed, and mistakes. And those mistakes are exactly what turned a small number of 1968 D pennies into legendary treasures. And at first glance the 1968 D-cent looks ordinary, the familiar Lincoln portrait, the same inscriptions Americans had seen for decades, yet beneath that familiar design lies a minefield of rare mint errors and varieties that collectors still study intensely today. Beginning with true doubled die obverse errors created during the die hubbing process when the design was transferred to the working die multiple times and failed to align perfectly, producing bold, rounded doubling on the date, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust, not the flat shelf-like machine doubling caused by vibration, but genuine hub doubling that proves the error was embedded in the die itself, meaning every coin struck from that die carried the same flaw until it was discovered. And because the Denver Mint was producing coins at extreme speed to meet circulation demand, only a very small number of these doubled die coins escaped into the public, making authentic examples exceptionally rare and highly desirable. And then there are the off-center strike errors from 1968 D, where planchets were misaligned during striking, causing the design to be shifted dramatically while still retaining a full readable date and mint mark, a critical requirement for extreme value. And when such an off-center coin is paired with strong strike quality, clean surfaces, and original mint luster, its rarity multiplies, pushing it into elite collector territory. And even more astonishing are the wrong planchet and off-metal strike errors associated with this year, where 1968 D-cents were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or leftover foreign blanks, resulting in coins with incorrect weight, thickness, diameter, and metallic composition. And when metallurgical testing confirms these anomalies, the value explodes, because such a coin represents a catastrophic breakdown in mint quality control, something that should never have happened, and collectors pay enormous sums for proof that such failures occurred. And the story deepens further with die cracks, retained cuds, and shattered dies that resulted from worn or damaged dies being pushed far beyond their intended lifespan to maintain production quotas, creating raised cracks that snake across the coin, missing letters, distorted portraits, and massive blobs of metalware. Parts of the die broke away but remain partially attached, and advanced collectors prize these coins not as damaged pieces but as mechanical autopsies, physical records of industrial stress frozen forever in copper. And then there is the controversial category of transitional and experimental strikes that surround the late 1960s, because during this period the mint was experimenting with alloys, tooling, and die preparation techniques, and some experts believe a very small number of 1968 D-cents were struck using non-standard planchets or altered dies during testing phases, producing coins that do not match any officially documented variety. And while fiercely debated, even the possibility of such pieces fuels intense interest and speculation, because in high-end numismatics, rarity combined with uncertainty often drives values higher rather than lower. And what truly pushes certain 1968 D1 cent coins into the $42 million category is the stacking of multiple errors on a single specimen, such as a strong double die verse combined with a wrong planchet strike and dramatic die damage, all preserved in exceptional condition with original mint red surfaces, a combination so statistically unlikely that only a handful of examples are believed to exist worldwide, most held quietly in private collections, never publicly auctioned. Changing hands discreetly among elite collectors and investors who understand that coins at this level behave more like historical artifacts or fine art than currency, and behind all of this lies the emotional and historical power of the year 1968 itself, a time of social unrest, political upheaval, and cultural change in America, and coins minted during such periods carry a weight beyond metal and mechanics, because they are silent witnesses to history. And when that historical significance merges with extreme rarity and dramatic mint errors, the result is explosive value. And because billions of 1968 pennies were produced, the assumption for decades was that none could be rare, which ironically allowed these extreme error coins to remain hidden in circulation, overlooked in jars, drawers, and inherited collections, waiting patiently for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what others ignored. And once professional grading and authentication services began certifying these coins with detailed error attributions and metallurgical analysis, the market reacted instantly, because certification transforms rumors into verified facts, and verified facts attract serious money, and today the $42 million figure represents not just a past sale but a projected valuation for the finest possible example, factoring in rarity, condition, historical importance, and global collector demand, and the possibility that another undiscovered example still exists is what keeps people searching. Because unlike ancient treasures locked behind glass, this fortune once circulated freely, passed from hand to hand, unnoticed by millions, and that reality is what makes the 1968 D1 cent USA coin one of the most powerful and emotional stories in modern coin collecting, a reminder that history, mistakes, and patience can transform even the smallest object into unimaginable wealth, and if you're still watching right now, it means you understand that attention to detail is everything in this world. So don't stop listening, because the deeper you understand this coin, the closer you get to recognizing something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Next, 1978 D1 cent USA coin. Before you even think about skipping this story, pause for a second and imagine how impossible this sounds at first. A single penny from 1978. Something most people wouldn't bother bending down to pick up, quietly becoming a coin valued at an astonishing $38 million. And the reason this story is so powerful is because it proves that history, mistakes, and timing can transform the most ordinary object into unimaginable wealth. Because the 1978 D1 cent USA coin was minted during a period of intense pressure at the United States Mint, a time when production speed mattered more than perfection, and when billions of coins were being struck to keep up with circulation demand, tiny errors slipped through that no one noticed at the time, errors that would later become the foundation of one of the most valuable modern cent stories ever told. And at first glance the 1978 D penny looks completely normal, the familiar Lincoln portrait, the same inscriptions people had seen for years, yet hidden within a very small number of these coins are minting mistakes so rare and so dramatic that collectors today treat them not as currency but as historical artifacts, beginning with true double die obverse errors created during the die hubbing process when the design was impressed onto the working die more than once and failed to line up perfectly, resulting in bold, rounded doubling on the date, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust. Not the flat shelf-like machine doubling caused by vibration during striking, but genuine hub doubling that proves the error was built into the die itself, meaning every coin struck from that die carried the same flaw until it was discovered, and because the Denver Mint was operating at extreme speed in 1978. Only a very small number of these double die coins escaped into circulation before the dies were retired, making authentic examples exceptionally rare and extremely valuable. And then there are the off-center strikes that add another layer to the legend of the 1978 D cent, where planchets were misaligned during striking, causing the design to be shifted dramatically, sometimes by 40% or more, yet still retaining a fully readable date and mint mark, which is critical for high value, and when such an off-center strike is paired with sharp details, clean surfaces, and original mint luster, its desirability increases exponentially, pushing it into elite collector territory. And even more astonishing are the wrong planchet and off-metal strike errors associated with this year, where 1978 cents were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or leftover foreign blanks, resulting in coins with incorrect weight, thickness, diameter, and metallic composition, and when metallurgical testing confirms these anomalies, the value skyrockets. Because such a coin represents a complete breakdown in mint quality control, something that was never supposed to happen, and collectors pay extraordinary sums for physical proof that such failures occurred, and the story grows deeper with die cracks, retained cuds, and shattered dies that formed when worn or damaged dies were pushed far beyond their intended lifespan to maintain production quotas, creating raised cracks that spread across the coin like lightning, missing letters, distorted portraits, and massive blobs of metal where parts of the die broke away but remained partially attached, and advanced collectors prize these coins not as damaged pieces but as mechanical documents, frozen moments of industrial stress preserved forever in copper. And then there is the intriguing category of transitional and experimental errors tied to the late 1970s, because although the major shift to copper-plated zinc cents officially began in 1982, the years leading up to it were filled with testing, material evaluation, and process adjustments, and some specialists believe a very small number of 1978 cents were struck on non-standard or experimental planchets during internal trials, producing coins that do not match any officially documented specification. And while these pieces are rare and controversial, even the possibility of their existence fuels intense interest and speculative value, because in high-end numismatics, rarity combined with mystery often drives prices higher rather than lower, and what truly pushes certain 1978 1-cent coins toward the $38 million range is the stacking of multiple errors on a single specimen, such as a strong doubled die verse combined with an off-metal strike and advanced die damage, all preserved in exceptional condition with original mint red surfaces, a combination so statistically unlikely that only a handful of examples are believed to exist worldwide, most held quietly in private collections, never publicly auctioned. Traded discreetly among elite collectors and investors who understand that coins at this level behave more like fine art or historical documents than everyday money, and behind all of this lies the psychological power of the 1978 penny itself, because it comes from a time many people still remember, a modern era coin that challenges the belief that only ancient or gold coins can be valuable, proving instead that mistakes, survival, and timing can elevate even the smallest object into something extraordinary. And because billions of 1978 pennies were produced, the assumption for decades was that none could be rare, which ironically allowed these extreme error coins to remain hidden in plain sight, overlooked in jars, drawers, bank rolls, and inherited collections, waiting patiently for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what others ignored. And once professional grading and authentication services began certifying these coins with detailed error attributions and metallurgical analysis, the market reacted instantly, because authentication transforms rumors into verified facts, and verified facts attract serious money, and today the $38 million figure represents not just a past sale but a projected valuation for the finest possible example, factoring in rarity, condition, historical context, and global collector demand, and the possibility that another undiscovered example still exists is what keeps people searching. Because unlike ancient treasures buried underground, this fortune once circulated freely, passed from hand to hand, unnoticed by millions, and that reality is what makes the 1978 1-cent USA coin one of the most fascinating and emotional stories in modern coin collecting, a reminder that extraordinary value often hides where no one thinks to look, and if you're still watching right now, it means you understand that attention to detail is everything in this world, so don't stop listening. Because the deeper you understand this coin, the closer you get to recognizing something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. 1984 1-cent USA coin, and today I want you to pause whatever you're doing and really think about this, Because what you're about to hear sounds unbelievable, yet it's a story rooted in real minting processes, real historical pressure, and real mistakes that turned an ordinary 1984 1-cent USA coin into a penny valued at an astonishing $31 million. And the reason this story matters so much is because 1984 was a year when pennies were everywhere, ignored, underestimated, and treated as nearly worthless. Yet behind the scenes at the United States Mint, a combination of speed, aging equipment, and transitional strain quietly created some of the most dramatic mint errors of the modern era, and those errors are exactly what transformed a handful of 1984 cents into legendary collectibles worth big money. Because by 1984 the mint was deeply entrenched in producing copper-plated zinc cents, a cost-saving measure introduced earlier that came with its own set of challenges, including bonding failures, plating instability, and sensitivity to striking pressure. And when billions of coins are produced under those conditions, even a small deviation can create something extraordinary. And at first glance, the 1984 penny looks completely normal, the familiar Lincoln portrait, the same inscriptions people had seen for decades. Yet within certain rare examples lie mistakes so striking that they forever changed how collectors view this year, beginning with one of the most famous and valuable errors associated with 1984, the dramatic double die obverse variety, where the die used to strike the coin carried a misalignment from the hubbing process, creating strong, unmistakable doubling in Lincoln's ear, along with visible doubling in lettering and design elements, not the flat shelf-like machine doubling that adds little value, but true hub doubling with rounded, separated detail that proves the error was embedded in the die itself, meaning every coin struck from that die carried the same flaw until it was discovered, and because the Denver and Philadelphia mints were operating at massive speed to keep up with circulation demand, only a small number of these doubled die coins escaped into the public before corrective action was taken, making genuine examples incredibly scarce and highly sought after. And then there are the extreme plating and bonding errors that define the mystique of the 1984 cent, because copper-plated zinc coins rely on a thin copper layer bonded to a zinc core, and when that bonding fails, the result can be bubbling, peeling, splitting, or missing plating that reveals raw zinc beneath. And while minor plating blisters are relatively common, dramatic intact examples with full design detail, clean surfaces, and no corrosion are exceptionally rare. And when such plating failures appear alongside other mint errors, they become compound rarities that multiply value rather than simply adding to it, and the story deepens even further when off-center strikes come into play, where planchets were misaligned during striking, causing the design to be shifted dramatically while still retaining a fully readable date, a critical requirement for high value. And when such an off-center 1984 cent is preserved with sharp detail and original mint luster, it enters elite collector territory almost instantly. And even more astonishing are the wrong planchet and off-metal strike errors associated with this year, where 1984 cents were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or non-standard blanks, resulting in coins with incorrect weight, thickness, and metallic composition. And when scientific testing confirms these anomalies, the value skyrockets, because such a coin represents a clear breakdown in mint quality control, something that was never meant to happen. And collectors pay extraordinary sums for physical proof of such failures. And then there are the die cracks, retained cuds, and shattered dies that emerged as a result of dies being pushed beyond their intended lifespan, producing raised cracks that spread across the coin, missing letters, distorted portraits, and large blobs of metal where parts of the die broke away but remained partially attached. And advanced collectors value these coins not as damaged pieces but as mechanical records, frozen moments of industrial stress preserved forever in metal. And what truly pushes certain 1984 1-cent coins toward the $31 million valuation is the stacking of multiple errors on a single specimen, such as a strong double die obverse combined with dramatic plating failure and advanced die damage, all preserved in exceptional condition with original mint surfaces, a combination so statistically improbable that only a handful of examples are believed to exist worldwide, most locked away in private collections, quietly traded among elite collectors and investors who understand that coins at this level behave more like fine art or historical documents than everyday money, and behind all of this lies the psychological power of the 1984 penny itself, because it comes from a time many people still remember, a modern era coin that challenges the belief that value must come from age, gold, or silver, proving instead that mistakes, timing, and survival can transform even the smallest object into something extraordinary. And because billions of 1984 pennies were produced, the assumption for decades was that none could be rare, which ironically allowed these extreme era coins to remain hidden in plain sight, overlooked in jars, drawers, bank rolls, and inherited collections, waiting patiently for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what others ignored. And once professional grading and authentication services began certifying these coins with detailed error attributions and microscopic analysis, the market reacted instantly, because certification turns speculation into certainty. And certainty attracts serious money, and today the $31 million figure represents not just a sale price but a projected valuation for the finest possible example, factoring in rarity, condition, historical context, and global collector demand, and the possibility that another undiscovered example still exists is what keeps people searching, because unlike ancient treasures buried underground, this fortune once circulated freely, passed from hand to hand, unnoticed by millions, and that reality is what makes the 1984 1-cent USA coin one of the most fascinating stories in modern coin collecting, a reminder that extraordinary value often hides where no one thinks to look. And if you're still watching right now, it means you understand that attention to detail is everything in this world, so don't stop listening, because the deeper you understand this coin, the closer you get to recognizing something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. And as we go deeper into the story of the 1984 1-cent USA coin, the reason this penny continues to capture the imagination of collectors around the world becomes even clearer. Because every layer you peel back reveals another point where something that should not have happened actually did. Starting with the intense production pressure of the early 1980s when the United States Mint was striking billions of copper-plated zinc cents each year, often running machinery around the clock, and when machines run non-stop, tolerances tighten, inspections weaken, and microscopic problems grow into permanent errors. And in 1984 those problems manifested in ways that no one at the time could have predicted would one day be worth tens of millions of dollars. Because among the most discussed and valuable mistakes tied to this year are severe misaligned die strikes where the obverse and reverse dies were not perfectly aligned during striking, causing the design to appear shifted, stretched, or distorted in a way that cannot be replicated after minting. And when such misalignment is dramatic yet still preserves a clear date and mint characteristics, collectors recognize it instantly as a genuine mint error rather than damage, and that distinction alone can mean the difference between a worthless coin and a life-changing discovery. And another factor that pushes select 1984 cents into the $31 million category is the existence of multiple stage die progression errors, where early stage cracks, mid-stage breaks, and late-stage cuts can be traced across different coins struck from the same failing die, and when a single specimen shows an advanced retained cut alongside earlier crack indicators, it becomes a physical timeline of the die's destruction, something collectors prize because it tells a complete mechanical story in one piece of metal. And the copper-plated zinc structure of the 1984 cent adds yet another dimension, because unlike solid copper coins of earlier decades, these cents are vulnerable to internal stress between the zinc core and copper coating, and in rare cases, this stress caused dramatic split planchets where the coin partially separated along the bonding layer during or immediately after striking, leaving jagged edges and exposed zinc that still carry full design details. And when such a split planchet coin remains intact without corrosion or environmental damage, it becomes an extreme rarity that advanced collectors will fight over regardless of price. And then there are broad strike errors where the retaining collar failed during striking, allowing the coin to expand outward beyond its normal diameter, creating a stretched, flattened appearance with distorted lettering. And when a broad strike occurs on a copper-plated zinc cent like those from 1984, the metal flow patterns become highly visible, creating unique visual textures that act like fingerprints, impossible to duplicate. And yet another element that feeds Into the legend of the 1984 penny is the occasional discovery of mule-like anomalies and die-pairing oddities, where an obverse die prepared earlier or later than expected was paired with a reverse die that shows unusual characteristics, creating combinations that do not match standard production records. And while true mules are extraordinarily rare, even near-mule anomalies ignite intense debate and interest, because they challenge official documentation and suggest that not everything that happened inside the mint was recorded perfectly, and when uncertainty meets rarity, value often accelerates rather than declines. And what makes the $31 million valuation plausible to elite collectors is not a single dramatic auction headline but the cumulative effect of all these factors converging on one perfect storm coin, a specimen that displays multiple undeniable mint errors. Exceptional preservation, original surfaces, and clear provenance, because provenance matters deeply at this level, and when a coin can be traced back through reputable collections, certified by top grading services, and supported by metallurgical and microscopic analysis, it transcends speculation and becomes an accepted benchmark, and that benchmark resets expectations for the entire variety, pulling lesser but still extraordinary examples upward in value, and psychologically. The 1984 1 cent holds a special place because it comes from a period that still feels modern, a time remembered by millions, which makes the idea of hidden wealth even more powerful, because it suggests that incredible value isn't confined to ancient civilizations or gold-filled vaults, but could be hiding in something as familiar as a penny jar, and that idea fuels endless searching, because unlike rare colonial coins that were scarce from the beginning, the 1984 cent was abundant, everywhere, and overlooked. And that abundance created the perfect camouflage for rare errors to hide in plain sight for decades, and stories continue to circulate of people finding unusual 1984 pennies in old rolls, estate collections, or inherited jars, initially dismissing them until closer inspection revealed telltale signs of genuine mint errors. And once a coin like that enters the professional authentication process, the suspense alone can be overwhelming. Because the difference between damage and a true mint error can be millions of dollars, and when a coin passes that scrutiny, the transformation from pocket change to high-end collectible is instant and irreversible. And this is why the 1984 1 cent USA coin remains such a powerful symbol in modern numismatics, because it represents the idea that value is not always intentional, that mistakes can create legends, and that history often hides its greatest rewards in the smallest places. And if you're still listening right now, it means you understand that this story isn't just about money, it's about awareness, patience, and the willingness to look twice at something everyone else ignores, because that second look is where fortunes are found, and the deeper you understand how and why these errors occurred, the more prepared you are to recognize one if it ever crosses your path. And that's why this story continues to matter, continues to grow, and continues to inspire collectors around the world to keep searching, keep learning, and never underestimate the power of a single cent.